Anyways, moving on to a very classic horror film, Friday the 13th. Now, this is obviously the original one from, 1980?
Indeed.
Just like most slasher films, it's not an overly complex plot. A group of camp counselors trying to reopen a summer camp where a child had drowned many years ago, and of course they're stalked and murdered by this unknown person. This is the first movie in what I'd assume is the longest running horror franchise, at least in terms of movies or sequels. I don't mind the movie. I think there's certainly a suspense element to it when it comes to who's committing the murders, though that suspense is somewhat lost on repeat viewings. I'd definitely say it's the least entertaining movie in the series for me. Not just because it doesn't have our hockey mask wearing Hulk of a maniac as per the sequels, but it just does some things that I don't particularly care for. Like the first person view of the majority of these kills I mean, when it comes to video games, I don't like playing them in first person view, and I guess with movies it's somewhat a similar thing. And I think some of the scenes, like, they come across these camp counselors and they say, "Oh, hey, it's you," and it just seems kind of silly that, like, they're clearly trying to avoid spoiling the person's name. It just doesn't seem 100% natural that they wouldn't say, "Oh, hey, that person's name," rather than say, "Oh, it's you." And yeah, I don't know. It's a little thing, but I mean, we talked about Sweet 16, what was it, a week or two ago, and that has first-person view kills, but that's a movie I enjoy irrespective of the kills, and I think with Friday the 13th, which has a couple of decent kills thanks to, Tom Savini's effects, but if you took the kills out of the movie, I mean, for me, there's not anything special to enjoy about the movie.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think there's necessarily anything special. I do think a lot of the characters, I think a lot of them are sort of fun. There's a lot of really, sort of amusing scenes. One in which you're trying to sort of kill a snake, and it's just utterly ridiculous. They're all just jumping around, just trying to find the snake to kill it, and now they were just like marching around playing Strip Monopoly. I don't know. This movie is one that when I was growing up, I said it quite a few times. So it's one that has somewhat nostalgic feelings for me. I agree that sometimes the first person thing, like, "Hey, how are you doing?" gets a bit much. And I think the movie probably would have been better solved if they had introduced the killer before the finale. Apparently, a lot of people, when this movie first came out in theaters, there was a decent amount of people who thought Crazy Ralph was the guy behind a lot of the killings going on. It's just, I know, from a modern day perspective, it sort of just blows my mind, because I feel like most horror fans know who's actually doing this stuff. I don't know. For me, there's a lot about this movie I really like. The teenagers just marching around, the one guy dressed up as an Indian when the police guy comes about. I think there's a lot of fun things in this movie. There's characters, some of whom aren't necessarily fully developed, but you still have a fun time with them. Tom Savini does a great job with the death scenes. And to be honest, there's very few death scenes in the movie that disappoint me. And there's some really great ones too. And especially like the last 30 or so minutes, there's some characters like running around in the rain, finding bodies, trying to find help, and I just really like that vibe. It's almost like a hopeless situation which they think finally gets fixed at the end, and then everything goes to hell. So I know it's not nearly as good as movies like A Nightmare on Elm Street or like Halloween. And like Chucky said, there's some sequels that are quite a bit better. Like Friday the 13th Part 4, which is probably one of the best movies in the series. But for sort of almost like a rip-off of the late 70s slasher success, I think Friday the 13th does a pretty good job.
And I like the dream sequence at the end, as for anyone who's seen the movie knows what happens there, but
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry. I just wanted to point out. I actually think that's a better dream sequence than at the end of the original K, which you may disagree with, but I actually really like this one.
It's definitely not as good as Carrie's end sequence.
Definitely is, but okay.
Okay. For anyone who hasn't seen the movie, I'm guessing pretty much everyone has, but then again, there's some person out there who, maybe some young person who's just getting into horror, they haven't seen it. So, if there's anyone out there who doesn't want it spoiled, maybe just not listen to what I'm just about to say for the next 20 seconds, but as we all know, the killer at the end, Jason's mother, I just don't find her to be anywhere near as interesting as Jason himself, and I think that's another big thing about the movie, that, I mean, it's not a bad plot twist, but I just don't see her being anywhere near as interesting as Jason is in any of the other sequels, so...
I think if they had actually went more into her character, there could have been maybe a little more potential. Like I said, if this individual was, appeared early in the movie in any capacity, it might have brought a lot more positive feelings toward the end. When the movie just sort of shoehorns in the character at the very end, or that's the mysterious killer, it leaves a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. Because, there's no possible way if you're watching the movie you can suspect, oh hey, it's this character. So I don't know. In some ways it just doesn't even seem right, even though I really enjoy the finale.
Of course, the music in the movie's quite good. Anytime you've got this iconic type of music created for a franchise, they've done well.
Yeah, I think the composer was it Herman Fradini, I think? Yeah, the guy who did the music was, I think, pretty top notch. And I'm not, unlike Chucky, I'm not one who usually notices, music a lot of times in movies. I'm generally more interested in, I don't know, either ghost, toy, or other things. But the music in this one, especially for a slasher movie, and slashers generally don't have standout music. I thought this one did a pretty fantastic job trying to sort of set itself apart from the crowd. The one of the characters we were introduced to in sort of modern day times, I think her name was Annie. I thought she would have made a pretty compelling, I guess, main character, but then she's somewhat dispatched pretty early on, which was somewhat disappointing, because I actually, every time I watch this movie, that character, I just sort of really like. She has just sort of a spunk to her, so it's also sort of disappointing that she sort of dies off so soon. Otherwise, I know, I think a lot of the characters are sort of interesting, even if none of them are necessarily fully developed. This is a classic of the slasher genre, and I think it has really just a lot of great carols. I think there's a lot of good things going for it. I know that some people somewhat, look at this one as just almost like a rip-off of, like I said, like earlier slashers. Oh, hey, they made Halloween and now they just made Friday the 13th. This definitely isn't anywhere near as good as Halloween, but I do think it's a pretty good movie. And having seen this so many times as a kid, it's a movie that I have a hard time coming up with negatives about. So I generally give this one probably an 8 out of 10.
And just piggybacking off what you said with this not being as good as Halloween, which I agree. And as we know, I don't think Halloween's a fantastic movie. I think it's a very good movie, which I give Halloween an 8 out of 10. So with this not being anywhere near as good as Halloween, or at least not as good, I give this one a 6 out of 10. I could sometimes, because it's such a classic movie, or it's a movie attached to such a huge horror franchise, sometimes that tends to, I guess you could say, I could see myself giving it a slightly higher rating if I was persuaded to, but yeah, no, I'm going to stick with a 6 out of 10. I just don't think it's anywhere near as good as some of the sequels.
No, I do have a quick question for you. Is this a movie that you saw quite a bit when you were a kid, or is this like a later, like teenage type thing?
I didn't see any of the Friday the 13th movies until I was probably in my late teens. Just to be honest, I can't really remember which ones I watched first, but I definitely didn't watch them in order.
Yeah, I'll just say as a fan of the series, generally speaking, honestly, if you've seen like part 2, you've basically seen part 4. So
yeah, but part 4 is way better.
Yes, although I think part 2 is pretty good, but
yeah, part 2's okay, but yeah, part 4 is one of the better ones in the series, in my opinion.